High IQ book enjoyers, what's up, chat? Special beings. Let's do a little. Let's get after it tonight.
Say what?
Say what? There's Crystalline right there.
Say what? Say what?
Let the beat ride.
Let the beat ride. Let the beat ride.
Let the beat ride.
Do it.
Let the beat ride. Let the beat ride. Let the beat ride. Let the beat ride.
Let the beat ride. Beat ride.
Let the beat ride.
Beat ride.
Say what?
Are we ready? All right, let's go.
Say what?
What's up, special beings, party people, Friday night streamers, PBR Street Gang, Almighty, OG Granola Wokesters, Chad Nerds, Cotellians, everybody's here. What's up, y'all? Tonight we're covering Crash by J.G. Ballard, and I'm going to focus on the book here, and I'm going to talk about the Cronenberg movie. David Cronenberg directed the movie. Came out in 1996. The book was published in 1973, and this one's crazy. I'm not sure how to introduce this one except for just to read J.G. Ballard's own parts of his own introduction, because I've never read. I mean, look, we've done a lot of books here. We've done a lot of lit analysis, and I don't think I've ever read a book like this before. And Ballard said that the movie went further than the book. He liked the movie. That's rare to hear from a writer. Now, oftentimes we don't listen to what the writer says about his work, but it is interesting. But it is interesting to read his own introduction, because the introduction to this book is probably the most. It probably conveys postmodernism better than anything that we've done so far, in terms of being a concise statement on what postmodernism became. And of course, the book's published in 1973. We've talked about. It's interesting. I mean, we need to talk about, just reiterate that modernity is the death of Queen Victoria in 1901, really to the present time. But if you break that down, we would have modernism in art, culture, life, the modern era, the industrial era, not post-industrial era, but the industrial era in terms of art and literature, especially 1901 to 1945. The Oopsenheimer thing happened in 1945, and that splits the 20th century, and then we have postmodernism after that. I would say, again, just to reiterate for the millionth time, that the postmodern period kind of ends at the big nine, and then we have a postmodern world, and then that sort of ends in 2020 after the age of the war on terror, and now we're in a postmodern world, or a hyper-realistic world, hyper-realism. Jean Baudrillard talks about this in Simulation and Simulacra. And he actually mentions this book, Crash, as being part of this. And so let's dive into this. Just one more thing. In terms of the labels and all this shit, I've talked about this before. It doesn't really matter in terms of delineating cultural or literary eras, right? We can have the Elizabethan poets, the Jacobean poets. We can have confessional poets in the 20th century. We can have postmodernism, all this stuff. None of that really matters. All that really matters is the great works and the bad works. And the bad works are this gigantic circle that outweighs the good works that are the canon works. We've covered a lot of sort of extra canonical works because, in terms of literature, because, we've done film for fun. But a lot of these things are prerequisites for understanding the works in the canon. And that's just natural for understanding literature. What is hyperrealism? Hyperreality is best, I'd say, encapsulated in the book White Noise that I covered, where we get a convergence of a meta reality where symbolism and fiction and reality kind of converge into one thing that's mixed with a post-industrial society, and that includes elements with this book especially, eros, thanatos, right? Sex, death, paranoia. As Jim Morrison said, the erotic politician, inverted world, broken, fragmented landscape of literature and of life. Ultra globalism, all that is hyper reality, hyper consumerism, where we feel like we're living in a sort of a surrealistic dream world, but it's different from the surrealism of the 20th century. And T.S. Eliot, remember, in this, and this is coming up, this is important for what's coming up, in The Wasteland, said that April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. So it's interesting that modernity is mixing memory and desire, the past and the future, in this it's the wasteland. It's the Valley of Ashes in The Great Gatsby. And White Noise really is the culmination of this in terms of artistic merit, I think. But Thomas Pynchon, Don DeLillo, Cormac, McCarthy, Bret, Easton, Ellis, and a couple others are sort of the height of what this stuff is in terms of literature. But this book is really interesting. I've covered J.G. Ballard before because I did a book called Cocaine Nights. And, of course, he did High Rise. He also, remember, J.G. Ballard also wrote Empire of the Sun. There was the movie, the Christian Bale's movie when he was young in the 80s, Empire of the Sun, because J.G. Ballard was born in Imperial Shanghai. And that's sort of a autobiographical story. But a lot of times J.G. Ballard's work takes it's when you think of technocratic culture, this is what it becomes. And this is like the merging of, it's like ultra body mods, hyper futuristic body modification mixed with anatomical biology in this weird, confusing symbiosis. And this introduction really kind of captures this. So I'm just going to start with the introduction here. So here's what he says. This is for Crash, his introduction to Crash in 1973. So he says, the marriage of reason and nightmare that has dominated the 20th century has given birth to an ever more ambiguous world. That right there is postmodernism. And again, the marriage of reason and nightmare that moves on from T.S. Eliot's memory and desire. Now we have reason and nightmare into postmodernity. So this is post A-bomb. And the movie was 1986. You really couldn't get a more appropriate director to direct the film version of this book than David Cronenberg because of his body of work really does. I mean, it's just Ballard over and over again. but we'll get to that. He says, across the communications landscape move the specters of sinister technologies and dreams that money can buy. Thermonuclear weapons systems and soft drink commercials coexist in an overlit realm ruled by advertising and pseudo events, science, and pornography. Over our lives preside the great twin leitmotifs of the 20th century, sex and paranoia. How appropriate for postmodernism. And of course, that's why Don DeLillo has all these, in White Noise, we have all these scenes in the supermarket. This is why Ginsberg did a supermarket in California. We often see the supermarket as the kind of temple of postmodernism, right? Because of the bright lights and the neon and the halogen bulbs and the rows and the people kind of walking in a trance and the supplicants to consumerism. Increasingly, our concepts of past, present, and future are being forced to revise themselves, just as the past, in social and psychological terms, became a casualty of Hiroshima and the nuclear age. So, in turn, the future is ceasing to exist, devoured by the all-voracious present. We have annexed the future into the present as merely one of those manifold alternatives open to us. This is what leads into the metaverse, right? We start to discuss, think about the way that Pods and metaverse would be seen later on from this. He couldn't even envision that happening, but this is the nucleus of that. Options multiply around us, and we live in an almost infantile world where any demand, any possibility, whether for lifestyles, travel, sexual roles, or identities, can be satisfied instantly, which is Brave New World. In addition, I feel that the balance between fiction and reality has changed significantly in the past decades. Increasingly, their roles are reversed. We live in a world ruled by fictions of every kind. Mass merchandising, advertising, politics conducted as a branch of advertising, the preempting of any original response to experience by the television screen or any screen. We live in an enormous novel. It is now less and less necessary for the writer to invent the fictional content of the novel. The fiction is already there. The writer's task is to invent the reality. That's really brilliant. Do you understand? Do you even understand? You guys do. But it's important for us to understand the significance of what he's saying here, because this moved on and became, from the television screen, it became, of course, this led into the all-encompassing 1984-esque watching us back and collecting data smartphone, and then eventually into the infinite scroll. But it's also that we have become the sort of heroes of our own story, for good or for better or for worse, right? And always on camera, always being listened to. Total panopticon. But what does this mean for the writer? He says, in the past, we've always assumed that the external world around us has represented reality, however confusing or uncertain, that the inner world of our minds, its dreams, hopes, ambitions, represented the realm of fantasy and the imagination. These roles, it seems to me, have been reversed. The most prudent and effective method of dealing with the world around us is to assume that it is a complete fiction. Conversely, the one small note of reality left to us inside our own heads, Freud's classic distinction between the latent and manifest content of the dream, between the apparent and the real, now needs to be applied to the external world of so-called reality. Now, he's not saying that that is true. He's not saying that's truth, and it's not that I agree with this. I'm just saying that is the way that things have been presented to us in art, and that is clearly the MO of art, culture, and literature now, and it has been. Yo, what's up, Jamie? And by the way, shouts out to Jamie, because Jamie is the one who brought to mind the hero of one's own reality, or one's own novel, or one's own story, which is a kind of psychopathological statement that Ballard is going to continue to make in this introduction, and that becomes the narrative mode in this book. Given these transformations, what is the main task of facing the writer? Can he any longer make use of the techniques and perspectives of the traditional 19th century novel, with its linear narrative, its measured chronology, its consular characters grandly inhabiting their domains within an ample time and space? Is his subject matter, the sources of his character and personality, sunk deep in the past, the unhurried inspection of roots, the examination of the most subtle nuances of social behavior and personal relationships? Has the writer still the moral authority to invent a self-sufficient and self-enclosed world, to preside over the characters like an examiner, knowing all the questions in advance? Can he leave out anything he prefers not to understand, including his own motives, prejudices, and psychopathology? There you go. I feel myself that the writer's role, his authority and license to act, have changed radically. I feel that, in a sense, the writer knows nothing any longer. He has no moral stance. This is Ballard talking in his introduction again about 1973, a kind of midpoint in terms of post-modernity between 1945 and Big Nine. He has no moral stance. He offers the reader the contents of his own head, a set of options and imaginative alternatives. His role is that of the scientist, whether on safari or in his laboratory, faced with an unknown terrain or subject. All he can do is to devise various hypotheses. Crash is such a book, an extreme metaphor for an extreme situation, a kit of desperate measures only for use in an extreme crisis. Crash, of course, is not concerned with an imaginary disaster, however imminent, but with a, how do we say this? A dynamic cataclysm that kills hundreds of thousands of people each year and injures millions, right? The car accident, the car crash. Do we see that in the car crash, a sinister portent of a nightmare marriage between sex and technology? Will modern technology provide us with hitherto undreamed of means for tapping our own psychopathologies? Is this harnessing of our innate perversity conceivably of benefit to us? Is there some deviant logic unfolding more powerful than that provided by reason? Throughout Crash, I've used the car not only as a sexual image, but as a total metaphor for man's life in today's society. As such, the novel has a political role quite apart from its sexual content. But I would like to think that Crash is the first pornographic novel based on technology. In a sense, pornography is the most political form of fiction, dealing with how we use and exploit each other in the most urgent and ruthless way. He says, needless to say, the ultimate role of Crash is cautionary, a warning against that brutal, erotic, and overlit realm that beckons more and more persuasively to us from the margins of the technological landscape. Quite an introduction, and this is that's J.G. Ballard actually writing in 1995. So at the tail end of post-modernity in terms of right up before Big Nine. But some of my notes on here I wrote were, of course, the car as a sexual and political image, erotic politicians, that's Jim Morrison, cataclysm and pandemic, Dan Pemick, close, psychopathological and postmodernism, and then I said CF, airplane crashes in white noise. And this is, of course, passions. The book is about the being an absolute. This book is in extremis. In extremis means death, right? And that's really the apotheosis of what the characters do in the book, and that's what Ballard is talking about here, what his speaker talks about in the novel in terms of the ultimate extension of humanity in the postmodern or later hyper-realistic era. So on the one hand, we have the merging of sex, death, and technology. And this is people in the book who are the absolute passion slaves. There's no other book I've read, I think, that really captures this like this book does. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And so what Ballard does here is he picks as his mode, as his vehicle, pun for the narrative, the pornographic scenario. And now the book is extremely off-putting. It's gross. I can't tell you how many times I wrote the word gross on the actual text here. It's vile, it's gross, it's creepazoid, it's fucking ugh. But what he's doing here is in a way, this captures completely in narrative form, in fictional form, what he says at the beginning of the introduction, which is that it's the writer's task to invent reality, because fiction, our world in a lot of ways, is we see this sort of clownish fictional, overproduced, oversaturated thing happening all the time, and it's never been more prevalent, obviously. Of course, it's kind of relative in terms of where people live. They don't know what it'll be like now, though. I think that the future is now, and we can imagine all those things. Ballard does a pretty amazing job of this. And so, so, yeah, we're riding with Biden. We're riding with Biden, you guys. So let's see. Where should I start? First of all, let's start with the beginning here. Here's what happens in the book. Let me tell you what the book is about. Okay, here's the narrative. So it's a framed novel, non-linear, which is crazy because you would think this would be. We just did a members stream on other crash cinema, right? We talked about Death Proof and a bunch of other films, and how it's important and significant that those films are linear in terms of the narrative because the road itself is in a line, right? So we're on the journey with the characters in the cars in the various movies. Death Proof, Wolf Creek, Convoy, to pick any road movie, right? Mad Max is different, especially Mad Max Fury Road is another road movie, is a dystopian, post-apocalyptic dystopian road movie. This isn't post-apocalyptic, but but that's non-linear. We get flashbacks in terms of Max's character, but that's because of his broken psyche at the beginning of the movie, and he keeps having these flashbacks. So the road, we go off-road, we veer off, we go back in time, forward in time, so that makes sense. But this one is interesting because the movie is actually completely linear. It's in time frame. It starts at the beginning and ends at the end. This one starts at the end and ends at the beginning, but the rest of it is totally linear. And that's because the speaker here, which he doesn't introduce himself by name, but the speaker's name is Ballard. Now, this, of course, brings to mind the difference between the writer and the speaker in the book. This is never the case. We just did Cormac, McCarthy, and All the Pretty Horses. We talked about Shakespeare so many times. And like Harold Bloom said, there's very little correlation, if at all, between Shakespeare and Hamlet or McCarthy and John Grady Cole, except for like his age. With Shakespeare, it would be his son Hamnet that passed away. Or with Cormac McCarthy, it's like his age in 1948. He's like 16. But that's where it sort of ends. And none of that is even relevant anyway, because we have a character in the book. This is supposed to be a sort of alternate future now, where Ballard is the speaker, but he's not even introduced in this because he becomes selfless in all the worst ways. He doesn't serve. He doesn't serve others. He serves his own sort of paranoid sexual technocracy by realizing his self-potential and his identity, which is omnisexual, and merging it with technology in this car. So here's what happens in the book. We get a description of a guy named Vaughn, and Vaughn is directing. He's working around the film industry. The book's set in London, and we have Ballard, who works for Shepperton Studios. He's kind of like a producer, and then we have Vaughn, who he's done various things with cars in movies and film. But Ballard is in a car accident and discovers something deviant about himself when he's in the car accident. And then he finds basically this small community of people who crash cars to get their ultimate gross kicks. Okay. And Vaughn, he meets this guy, Vaughn, who is kind of he's like a Neil Cassidy, which is appropriate for this because Neil Cassidy and Sal Paradise, right? Dean Moriarty and Sal Paradise, or Neil Cassidy and Jack Kerouac On the Road. It's as if we took On the Road, which is a work of just postmodernism, but kind of total Americana, and then we push it all the way to its logical extension. And all of the nasty, creepy things in this novel, which ultimately are satanic. I mean, the book is probably one of the most satanic books I've ever read. And it's not Ballard and the book. It's not that the book itself, it's what he's describing as the world, what he's conveying about the world in the book, which is just total destruction. And they worship destruction. and their destruction has a Crowleyan sexual potency. It's almost like magic. And a lot of the language bears that out. But so what happens is Vaughn basically says that his goal, he says this right when he meets Ballard, his goal is, he says, do you know Elizabeth Taylor? Because Elizabeth Taylor in the novel has been filming at Shepperton Studios, and Vaughn has copies of various famous people's wrecked cars. So he stages a reproduction of James Dean's fatal crash with another car. And these guys, like, they're not wearing seatbelts, they're not wearing safety gear because he wants to make it authentic. And they crash into one another. And his ultimate goal is to stage Jane Mansfield's wreck, which his friends in the film end up doing that. And the girl gets decapitated. The guy dies in the wreck. And this is like overtly a sexual act for them in the book and the movie. And Vaughn is a kind of viewer. He's like an objective viewer of this stuff, but he keeps these books of car crash photos like creepy people keep, like in Bret Easton Ellis's Rules of Attraction. Remember the girl who keeps the book of sexual diseases, and that's supposed to put her off of doing the sexual act in college, but ultimately it ends up pushing her to that. Or it's like the Larry David episode in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Remember where he gives John McEnroe the book of like deformities, and they're like they go to the concert and he's like gross, and they get kicked out of the concert. But this is a book of car accidents, and it's extremely accurate and specific. And his goal, how Vaughn wants to die, is to crash his car into Elizabeth Taylor in real life. And so he says that by doing that, he doesn't say this overtly, but we can imagine that he's merging celebrity, kind of a celebrity worship, consumerism, sex, death, and technology all into one blazing act, which is essentially so satanic. And so that doesn't happen, but Vaughn ends up pushing Ballard into this place where he can't even, he has no personal relationship with his wife. They are totally everything people. And of course that leads to, there's language in this book that is, think about the way that these people act, and there's obviously no virtue. Their virtue becomes this system of personalized injuring morality, where it is not morality, it's just absolute slavery. And so of course that leads them to, there's a lot of language in this book that is just the most, I can't even say it. It's like the grossest, most vile things in this book. So they have no limits, right? It's like with Crowley, it's, no limits, no laws, absolute liberation. And the book is a depiction of the way that is in the postmodern world. That is essentially an accurate depiction of now. Now, of course, we don't have the thing with the car crashes, but we do. We see that. Remember, we see this all the time. And what's really synchro about this is postmodern works often discuss plane crashes, especially white noise. Remember the family, Jack Gladney's family, and especially Jack Gladney and his son, are obsessed with watching plane crashes on the news. So that's supposed to be a fiery inferno act for the public to consume in an objective sense, but all the time, and then they personalize it. Yo, shouts out to Jamie. Jamie sends $5 super chat. She says, do you think crash is a metaphor for the act like the slang smash? Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, so what they describe is the fact that, so let me put it like this as simply as possible. And thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate that. You guys, you can like and support, and you can send in your super chats. You can ask questions. Please, I'll answer your questions about whatever, especially literary matters and film matters. And you can also drop donations in PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. PayPal, right? Thank you so much. So look, yeah, it is a metaphor for the act, and I'll just put it like this. So what Ballard is doing here is he's showing that never before, I like to think of it like this, never before in human history have human beings had such mobility, and the 70s is kind of the culmination of this, right? This is when we went past the fast cars of the 50s, which is a result of like a lot of cars and motorcycles coming out of the engineering works of the World War II, or when people first had cars. The 70s is like, we think of the gas crisis and all this stuff in the 70s, and we went from the huge cars, and then they started to get smaller, but the huge cars become phallic. They become a symbol of sexuality. They're sold in terms of sexual liberational verbiage. And so the characters intend to get off by crashing into one another. Just how because their bodies, it's not that their bodies or that they as people are incapable of love or the act of intimacy with another person, but they go beyond that. Now they are absolute slaves to this, and they want le petit mort, right? The little death, the big O in French. They want it to be le grand mort. They want it to be the big infernal act of sex and death all in one, in order to transcend the configuration is like a big mangled mass of machinery and human beings all mixed into one. And that's what Vaughn sees. He reenacts, and he gets tattoos. So his body is covered in scars and tattoos, and he gets tattoos of specific car emblems on his body and where they would penetrate his body in a crash. So like, for instance, if you're driving a Lincoln, we drive in that Lincoln, and the hood ornament you smash into a wall, and the hood ornament smashes through the windshield, and that goes into your sternum, then he gets the tattoo of it on his sternum. And it's not a full emblem, it's just the outline of it and half of it. How it would be in reality, right? And in a bruise mark. They see bruise marks, and especially the shattering of the windshield glass, as this act of terrifying beauty that gets embedded in the body, which is a complete destruction. This is really Crowleyan. I mean, there's a part in the book where he mentions how the speaker mentions how Vaughn appears shimmering in light, because the headlights and the way the windshield glass has frosted and broken and shattered is embedded in his body, like we see Lucifer shimmering with gemstones. And he worships him. He worships him in a total Crowleyan way. And Vaughn, in a way, Vaughn is concerned with doing his great work. He wants to do his working. Now, it's not mentioned Crowley in the book, but that's essentially the metaphor. It just embodies that in a way I've never seen in a book before like this. I mean, it's crazy. And, the book is so splattered with the disgusting language of, it makes you think of, okay, so on this page I wrote, stylizing her body, Nightcrawler, Man Ray, Ted Bundy, Leonard Lake, and Charles Ng, BTK. All of the serial killers do this, right? Which is, not all of them, but manipulate the body into specific works of art. We see this with Man Ray, right? We see this with Black Dahlia, Man Ray's, merging of musical instruments and body. And this is what Vaughn is trying to achieve here. So like, for instance, the book starts off, Vaughn died yesterday in his last car crash. During our friendship, he had rehearsed his death in many crashes, but this was his only true accident. Driven on a collision course towards the limousine of the film actress, his car jumped the rails of the London airport flyover and plunged through the roof of a bus filled with airline passengers. The crushed bodies of package tourists, like a hemorrhage of the sun, still lay across the vinyl seats when I pushed my way through the police engineers an hour later, holding the arm of her chauffeur, the film actress, Elizabeth Taylor, with whom Vaughn had dreamed of dying for so many months, stood alone under the revolving ambulance lights. As I knelt over Vaughn's body, she placed a gloved hand to her throat. And that's really the culmination of the book, even though it's the first paragraph. And what he's doing there is incredibly subtle at the beginning, of the book, but becomes increasingly overt. And what he's like, for instance, the hemorrhage of the sun is an unusual phrase, right? The crushed bodies of package tourists like a hemorrhage of the sun. Why of the sun? Because he sees exploding light, and that mixes with his obvious, what we're going to learn is sexual act or sexual reaction upon seeing this. He's a deviant. Vaughn dreams of dying for so many months and enacts this like as if he's doing the great work with the final culmination. It culminates in his death. Jamie and I just covered the lost symbol, and this is essentially what the guy in the lost symbol does, right? He wants to be smoked by his pops in the final working. That's the final stage of the ritual, right? Also, even the phrase stood under the revolving ambulance lights, we can see clearly the ambulance lights revolving. We see he's showing us imagery. But the fact that they're revolving mixes with that matches with the word sun, right? It's like the ambulance lights are revolving like this is our whole globe, and the word globular appears in this a number of times in the most disgusting way, because the dashboard of the vehicle becomes like a zodiac symbol in their sex death. He says, oh, look, here's another one, coronation, the corona, right? The corona of the sun and the hemorrhage of the sun and the revolution of the sun. Could she see in Vaughn's posture the formula of the death which he had devised for her? During the last weeks of his life, Vaughn thought of nothing else but her death, a coronation of wounds he had staged with the devotion of an Earl Marshal. The walls of the apartment near the film studios at Shepperton were covered with the photographs he'd taken through his zoom lens each morning as she left her hotel in London, from the pedestrian bridge across the westbound motorways and from the roof of the multi-story car park at the studios. The magnified details of her knees and hands on the inner surface of her thighs and the left apex of her mouth. I uneasily prepared for Vaughn on the copying machine in my office, handing him the packages of prints as if they were installments of a death warrant. At his apartment, I watched him matching the details of her body with the photographs of grotesque wounds in a textbook of plastic surgery. Fucking jeez. Okay, so another element of this, which is always conveyed through postmodern, it's one of the modes of postmodern literature, is the meta story. We have meta and we have layers of meta stories. So we have a character named Ballard, and the writer's named Ballard, and the character is working in a film studio where Elizabeth Taylor works, and the great work in the book involves the death of Elizabeth Taylor through a car accident, as filmed in a movie which will actually be the real thing and is all photographed by Vaughn. Do you see the layers, the meta layers? So it's like there's a distance between reality and fiction, but the object of the writer is to invent the fiction because the reality already exists, as he said. But the work of the speaker in the book is to converge all of those things in one, to crash them all together into one thing. One gigantic mass of death on display for everyone to see. Which is like, that is the most postmodern, bleak, satanic serial killing thing that I've seen in the books that we've read about these guys. I mean, Blood Meridian is a completely different type of work, but even that being, because it's set in the West, in the Old West, is kind of preliminary. It's sort of a genesis of all this. And Blood Meridian is much more Gnostic, overtly Gnostic. This is something even different from that. In the vision of a car crash with the actress, Vaughn was obsessed by many wounds and impacts, by the dying chromium and collapsing bulkheads of their two cars, meeting head-on in complex collisions endlessly repeated in slow-motion films. So the slow-motion film becomes the film that he sees replayed in his own psyche. By the identical wounds inflicted on their bodies, by the image of a windshield glass frosting around her face as she broke its tinted surface like a death-born Aphrodite, by the compound fractures of her thighs impacted against the handbrake mountings, and above all by the wounds to their genitalia, her uterus pierced by heraldic beak of the manufacturer's medallion, his emptying across the luminescent dials that registered forever the last temperature and fuel levels of the engine. Fucking shit, dude. This is intense. I read this so you don't have to. Oh, God, it's so fucking... Excuse my language. The affiliates will not be happy. Let's go to the next page. As I ran across to Vaughn, I saw him through the fractured windshield of the white convertible he had taken from the car park of the Oceanic Terminal. His exhausted face with its scarred mouth was lit by broken rainbows. So, again, the rainbow here, the physical rainbow of bodily function and blood mixed with leaked oil, mixed with the sweat from Vaughn, mixed with the arc lights on the accident, mixed with the revolving lights of the emergency vehicles, all forms a kind of satanic anti-peace rainbow of death, where they have ultimate sexual expression. I mean, isn't that, what do you guys think? I mean, that is, one thing this made me realize is that we've seen a number of, capital E events. Thanks for gifting the memberships there. Edward III gifted 5 memberships there. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Yes. Welcome, Natasha, Roos, and Pam, Itaska. And, there's Kristen again. So, look, we see these capital E events happen with cars. Remember, we saw the parade event happen. We saw the thing in Nice, right, where the guy's in the car driving through the crowd. Well, one thing this made me do, this book made me realize, is that this is so commonplace and such a thing that can only happen from then to now. So modernity is interesting because we went from 1901 to 1969. We on the surface level went from walking and riding horses, all biological, to walking on the moon, right, at Shepperton Studios. So the incredible increase in industrialism and then post-industrialism leading to hyper-reality is something that the human mind, for the people in this book at least, have trouble comprehending, and then they wish to become part of in this loss of meaning. They have no meaning in their lives. They are completely personalized. So the big capital E events that happen where the people do those things that we've seen so many times, especially, remember, in 2020, there were a bunch of them. I go, okay, there's no way that I can ever understand this or that I want to understand this. But I do in my logical, reasonable, mind, go, okay, this book captures what those people may have been doing. Not consciously, but that's essentially what they were doing. They were enacting this thing, this great convergence of all of these sick things in this big capital E event. So to ask the people why they would do such a thing is almost beyond them. It's almost like to be expected in the broken world that we're in. Broken in a fallen world by people who do this type of shit. It's a kind of circle. It's cyclical, I suppose. But yes, describes the ecstasies of head-on collisions. Through Vaughn, I discovered the true significance of the automobile crash, the meaning of whiplash injuries and rollover. You notice how he matches the bruise patterns to his own body, so he's trying to make them into one thing. He's trying to embody them. Together, we visited the Road Research Lab 20 miles to the west of London and watched the calibrated vehicles crashing into the concrete target blocks. Later in his apartment, Vaughn screened the slow-motion films of test collisions that he had photographed with his cinecamera. Sitting in the darkness on the floor cushions, we watched the silent impacts flicker on the wall above our heads. The repeated sequences of crashing cars first calmed and then aroused me. Ugh. Cruising alone on the motorway under the yellow glare of the sodium lights, I thought of myself at the controls of these impacting vehicles. On the calm summer evenings, these fast boulevards became a zone of nightmare collisions. Often we stopped under arc lights that flared over the sites of major collisions, watching while firemen and police engineers worked with acetylene torches and lifting tackle to free unconscious wives trapped beside their dead husbands. Above all, Vaughn waited for head-on collisions with the concrete pillars of the motorway overpasses, the melancholy conjunction formed by a crushed vehicle abandoned on the grass verge and the serene motion sculpture of the concrete. That's Man Ray. This is modern art to the absolute extreme. In extremis, death. And one thing that he calls Vaughn here is the nightmare angel of the highways. He calls it Autogeddon. That's what they want. It's an Autogeddon. The verbs and the way the book is written is incredible. It's unlike, for instance, Cormac McCarthy's last book, or the one that we just covered, where the paragraphs lengthen as the landscape lengthens and as their interstate sort of opens up into a serene, idyllic landscape to embody total freedom. Remember, that book was about freedom is solitude for the American. This one's the opposite. It's the convergence. It's no longer solitude. It's no longer one person. It's the crashing of two people in solitude into one another, forming one thing. Totally demonic. But the way the book is written is incredible because it starts to take on, it's written in blocks, like block paragraphs, as if we are going through the blocks of the urban landscape. Remember, what does he say in Clockwork Orange? Clockwork Orange is another great example of this. Where does he live in Clockwork Orange? Hold on. Where does Alex DeLarge live? He says, let me find his address. Alex DeLarge in Clockwork Orange. Yeah. Municipal Flat Block 18A, Linear North. Totally inhuman, right? It's like when your home became a dwelling unit, right? Or when people, remember when people started to describe the various rooms in their house as areas, which is a kind of, the next step is zone or pod. But instead of the living room, it became the living area or the living space. And by calling it the living space, the way that the architectural world conveys this, especially when you add a brutalism into it, is that the space is like Peter Brook's empty space. So every space is occupied by humans, but that still conveys to us that it's empty, which means that it's empty of ourselves, which means that we don't mean anything in the space. Instead of a home or a house where people live, this is the living room. There's room for us. We're here, and there's room for me, and there's room for a guest. There's room for people in here. Instead of space, static, dark, empty. It says, let's see, stylizing her body like in Nightcrawler. Remember, Nightcrawler deals with this because I covered Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler deals with stylizing the bodies for consumption on the news. Done by a total psychopath, right? But for everyone to see. Vaughn arranged her limbs in the posture of a dying cashier. Excitement in the complex geometries of a dented fender. In the unexpected variations of crushed radiator grills. In the grotesque overhang of an instrument panel. Chromium knives and frosted glass. For him, these wounds were the keys to a new sexuality born from a perverse technology. The images of these wounds hung in the gallery of his mind like exhibits in the museum of a slaughterhouse. I guess it is a mausoleum. Yeah, and then he goes through various instances of things that he imagines here. Look, see how it's also written in a kind of highway, like we're like highway style. Blocks and then lines of road interspersed with a median strip for the or a turnaround point for the authorities, right? I think of the crashes of psychopaths, implausible accidents carried out with venom and self-disgust, vicious multiple collisions contrived in stolen cars on evening freeways among tired office workers. I think of absurd crashes of neurasthenic housewives returning from their VD clinics, hitting parked cars in suburban high streets. I think of crashes of excited schizophrenics colliding head-on into stalled laundry vans in one-way streets, of manic depressives crushed while making pointless U-turns on motorway access roads, of luckless paranoids driving at full speed into the brick walls at the ends of known cul-de-sac, of sadistic charge nurses decapitated in inverted crashes on complex interchanges. Of buses filled with mental defectives drowning together stoically in roadside industrial canals. Long before Vaughn died, I had begun to think of my own death. With whom would I die, and in what role? Psychopath, neurasthenic, absconding criminal? Vaughn dreamed endlessly of the deaths of the famous, inventing imaginary crashes for them around the deaths of James Dean and Albert Camus, Jane Mansfield and John Kennedy. He had woven elaborate fantasies. For each of them, Vaughn devised an optimum auto death. Onassis and his wife would die in a recreation of the Dealey Plaza event. He saw Reagan in a complex rear-end collision, dying a stylized death that expressed Vaughn's obsession with Reagan's G organs, like his obsession with the exquisite transits of the screen actresses' parts across the vinyl seat covers of hired limousines. This is the I'm sorry, you guys. This is so fucking bad, isn't it? It's so crazy. But what's craziest about this is I think that you probably could read this book, especially when you are, if you read the book when you're younger. I think what's most seductive about this book is that it has an intense excitement in the language that becomes hypnotic. And that's supposed to mimic the sound of the automobile and the sound of the motion within the car, on a trip. And how everything can change in 1 second, and how the intense energy that is released in the car accident, especially the head-on collision, mimics this kind of psychosexual, deviant, Crowleyan, ritualized death modus. And so I think that's seductive. I think that, it really takes, that's why we're reading this, because, it takes discernment to read these books and go, what the fuck? This is now. This is just the landscape now. Do you agree? What do you guys think? I mean, the thing with John Kennedy is especially amazing because he has like a limousine with S-side doors, and they recreate this crash together where they're involved in this omnisexual event in the car. It's gross. And the driver of the James Dean car in the film is clearly concussed, and they go back to their flat in Linear North. And one of the Arquette girls is there. It's Patricia. I think it's Patricia Arquette, the one who was just in. She had just been in Pulp Fiction, and then she films this. And she's got these in the film. She's got these braces on her legs, and she's got her breast held on with a kind of a contraption. So she's a walking mechanism, and they see this as something to be admired. They want this. And then the JFK thing is interesting because at one point Ballard will question Vaughn and he'll say, is this a new theory on the event, on the 1963 event, that this was some sort of autoerotic, pun intended, event involving mass photography, mass public adulation, and horror. It's essentially aesthetic terror. And this is the most postmodern thing, probably in the book, in terms of what a postmodern viewpoint is looking at this, which occurs both in American Psycho, it occurs in Lunar Park by Bret Easton Ellis, it occurs in White Noise, and it essentially occurs in Blood Meridian. And that is, this is the personalized locus is extended to the entire globe. He says, in his mind, Vaughn saw the whole world dying in a simultaneous automobile disaster, millions of vehicles hurled together in a terminal congress of spurting loins and engine coolant. So you remember that scene in the book in American Psycho that I read a couple weeks ago as an excerpt, where the speaker mentions, Bateman in the book discusses how in the aftermath of the U2 concert, he sees a blood red mist, a crimson mist covering the entire world, filled with blood and consuming the whole world. And that's a psychopathy that becomes microcosm and macrocosmic, right? In this, it's the same thing, but it's with cars, and it actually makes sense in this, because what he says in the book is that the great Dan Pemick of all time is actually the car crash. So never at a time before has a person, really pretty much any person, been able to have access to a lethal mobile with such ease, right? Think about when the tank really came in. I think the tank really came into its own in Big Dub 1, right? In World War I. But you still have to be in the military. You still have to be in the tank division. You still have to be driving the tank, right? Now, of course, anybody remember there was a story a few weeks when the thing kicked off in the Eastern European place where one of the tanks ended up at a gas station in New Orleans, and it was like some boomer, and he was like, "Yeah, I bought it from over there. I just ordered it and it got here." So I guess you could just have that, but anybody. And what's crazy is that even if they take away your license, even if they take away your ability to have the car, people can still get one and do this. So you have the ability to be part of the great working, and in a split second cause a huge, massive metallic chromium capital E death event. This says, in his magic pool, lifting from her throat like a rare discharge of fluid from the mouth of a remote and mysterious shrine, I saw my own reflection, a mirror of blood, something else, and vomit, distilled from a mouth whose contours only a few minutes before had drawn steadily against his sexual act. God, it's just. So then after this first crash, Ballard goes to the hospital and he's cared for by the nurse in a plane crash unit. It's reserved for plane crashes because Vaughn has, in this first crash, killed the husband of this woman, Dr. Helen Remington. And then it turns out that he sees her in the hospital, and then they end up in the same place in the car park, in the parking lot, in the car park. And he offers her a ride. She has no car because it's been destroyed in the wreck, and her husband's dead. And he offers her a ride. She takes it, and then they end up finding that they are the same thing together. So he gets all these. Then they go to the demolition derby, and they end up getting all these dirty looks because he just, he killed her husband. But they have no feelings about this. This is the only way for them to gain access to who they are anymore. And of course, they lose who they are. The severed nerve, this is page 12 of the book. The severed nerve in my scalp had fractionally lowered my right eyebrow, a built-in eye patch that seemed to conceal my new character from myself. Right, he's lost in waves of psychic automation within this car. There's parts that I just totally fucking... Ugh. Page 25. The same open limousine. He has got the same open limousine in which President Kennedy had died. I remembered that one of Vaughn's obsessions had been the Kennedy event. And then they go to so Ballard basically falls in not love or lust, but obsession, skittles with Vaughn. I mean, with Ballard with Vaughn, and they go to the Museum of Wrecks. There's a Museum of Wrecks. Let's see. He says, I hesitated there like a husband collecting his wife from the depot of a strange and perverse dream. Some 20 or so crashed vehicles were parked in the sunlight against the rear wall of an abandoned cinema. At the far end of the asphalt yard was a truck whose entire driving cabin had been crushed, as if the dimensions of space had abruptly contracted around the body of the driver. He imagines Japanese Zero fighter aircraft, the module of intense excitement, sexual act between us would be a way of taking her revenge on me, he says. Oh my gosh. When I put my arm around her shoulder, she smiled briefly to herself, a nervous rictus of the upper lip which exposed her gold-tipped right incisor. I touched her mouth with my own, denting the waxy carapace of pastel lip coat, watching her hand reach out to the chromium pillar of the quarter window. Do you notice? I mean, one thing that's amazing about this, I think the reason that this is so effective is because of Ballard's writing. I mean, there's not a spare word here. A couple of times he repeated words within paragraphs, which I found odd. I thought that probably was honestly a mistake in editing, in his own editing of the book. But he probably left it in because the mistakes mirror the mistakes in the car crash. Because even as the car crashes are purposeful, there are mistakes made, and the car crash itself is a mistake that they find as ecstatic. But all of the language is so intense and mechanical. So much of it is cacophonous and hard and tactile and metallic and chromatic because it's supposed to mirror or convey the sense of the car driving along the road, right? Just as we're in the car of the speaker of the book driving down the road of the narrative. I thought it was interesting they mentioned the astronauts. He says they go to one of the museums and they look at one of the space capsules. The small space was crowded with angular controlled surfaces and rounded sections of human bodies interacting in unfamiliar junctions, like the first Skittles act inside an Apollo capsule, which is, I think, space is fake and gray, right? Armstrong. It's familiar geometry. I gazed at the jeweled grotto of the instrument panel, at the jutting shroud of the steering assembly, and the chromium heads of the control switches. So technology and a kind of metaphysical language gets inserted here, especially as we go on in the narrative. And eventually, he has no tenderness with his wife because he has to be with the wife of his victim, Helen Remington, but only in the car crash. So there's Robert Vaughn, nightmare angel of the expressways. Oh, here's an interesting part. This is in chapter 9 of the book. It's a short book. It's a short book because it's supposed to mirror the short life or the life cut short of the driver. The track was cleared and lines of white bollards were arranged to form the outline of a road intersection. Below us in the pits, the huge oil-smeared body of a man in a silver-studded jacket was being strapped into the driver's seat of a doorless car. His shoulder-length dyed blonde hair was tied behind his head with a scarlet rag. His hard face had the pallid and hungry look of an out-of-work circus hand. I recognized him as one of the stuntmen at the studios, a former racing driver named Seagrave. So Do you get the references in that, or the references later in literature or in film? First of all, the pallid and hungry look makes me think of what Caesar said about Cassius in Julius Caesar. He says, young Cassius has a lean and hungry look. I trust him not. Right? He trusts Brutus, but Cassius is always kind of hungry on the edge of the crowds, and he doesn't trust him. He's not fat and pampered. Yeah, there's one. Yeah, Grievance says, Anne Heche. Isn't Anne Heche the one who didn't Anne Heche just pass away in a car accident? Terrible. Wasn't that Anne Heche, or was that Tia Leone? Who was that? It was one of those. They're so numerous, right? Of course, when you think of what's the journalist's name? Robert. What's his name? The Hillary Crimeton guy, Robert. Somebody in chat? Tell me that guy who passed away. Of course, the car's taken over and he's driving a million miles an hour. The journalist. What was his name? But look, in this section, we get the driver as described. How Driver is described in the movie Drive, right? It's not a silver studded jacket, but it's a quilted jacket. We get the silver jacket of Kurt Russell as Stuntman Mike in the movie Death Proof. And we get the kind of scarlet rag. Mike, yes, thank you, Grievance. Yes, Michael Hastings. Michael, I don't want to say Robert. And then we get the stuntman aspect of this, the stuntman at the studios. So again, we get meta levels. And of course, the dyed blonde hair tied back is supposed to be a meta Hollywood. This guy's not Hollywood, but one thing that's interesting is that remember the car crash is mentioned in the assassination manual of CIA, right? Which is one of the most, one of the easiest ways to do those things. I was just reading Jesse Ventura's book again, where he goes through that at the beginning. Listen, did you know? Have you read the assassination manual? The car crash in the open window are the first things to look for any successful MK Delta. Have you ever heard of pink mist? He says. Yeah, so the stuntman is interesting because the stuntman, so think of, you guys have seen Drive, right? With Gosling, who's literally me. No, he's literally our friend Maddie, right? Remember what he does at the end of Drive, which is, and this is also in Too Old to Die Young, but in, because it's Nicholas Winding Refn, often with, it's weird how Nicholas Winding Refn is a kind of, he filmed that interview series with Kenneth Anger, and Kenneth Anger has a whole series of, he has that short film based on the kind of cruising thing, the black leather and the Skittles cruisers, right? And how the angel is constantly seen in this, the dark angel of the highways, the inverted angel, of course, the sort of demon of the highways. But the stuntman in Drive, remember when he's chasing the guy at the end, he's wearing the ghoulish mask. So he's wearing a mask, but the mask in a way, this is what is in my future book, is a mask of his own face. Now it's not Gosling, and it looks like how Michael Myers wears the mask of, what's his name? God, I'm losing names. There's so many fucking names. Captain Kirk. Michael Myers wears the mask of Captain Kirk from Devil's Reign, which has Anton LaVey in it. And the mask becomes a kind of, melted, ghoulish mask that looks human in the rearview mirror, and it looks human in the mirror of the cinema. So the stuntman will often look like a distorted version of the actor. It's like when you're watching a movie and, you freeze frame on Tango and Cash and you see that the guy playing Kurt Russell is just a different guy in a fake mullet. And there's something, in the uncanny valley about that. But that is all embodied within the life of these people in this narrative. And so that the guy, even the real guy, looks like he's wearing a mask of somebody else. I followed Vaughn. This is Yakin and Boaz. I followed Vaughn back to his car through the dispersing hospital visitors. Its slight lateral deflection, like the rake of the Lincoln's windshield pillars, expressed all Vaughn's oblique and obsessive passage through the open spaces of the mind. He's trying to transcend. He's trying to walk through this inverse metaphysical boundary into the illumination of the arc lights in the death accident on the demonic highway. The book gets more and more deviant as it goes on. He starts to see reflections of himself in the photography of Vaughn, who's been taking pictures of him with a telephoto lens. Apart from those photographs of myself in hospital taken with a zoom lens through the open window as I lay in bed, swathed in more bandages than I realized at the time, the background to all the pictures was the same. The automobile moving along the highways, around the airport, in the traffic jams of the flyover, parked in cul-de-sac and lovers' lanes. What concerned him was not the behavior of a 40-year-old producer of television commercials, but the interaction between an anonymous individual and his car, the transits of his body across the polished cellulose panels and vinyl seating, his face silhouetted against the instrument panels. He a number of times he mentions his latent Skittles elements in his own body, and I continuously wrote, they're not latent. These are obvious to anyone reading the book. It's just latent for him realizing it as the speaker. This is, let's see, chapter 11 of this book. Late that afternoon, I thought of Gabrielle's twisted body as I looked down over the makeup woman's shoulder at the infinitely more glamorous and guarded figure of the screen actress sitting behind the wheel of a crashed Citroën. At a discreet distance, the sound and lighting men watched her like spectators in a real accident. So reality mirrors and mimics fiction, and the two become exchanged and inverted, just like you said in the introduction. There's an interesting line in chapter 12. Am I under his thumb? No, but it's difficult to know where the center of his personality is. The center of his personality is in the engine of the car. Twisted and mangled like Twisted Metal 2. Calypso! You guys ever play Twisted Metal 2? On PlayStation 1? It's my favorite game of all time. Axel! Spectre! Speaking of which, not really speaking of which, but check out what I've been drinking. I've been drinking Zip Wow. Zip Wow. Do you like Nickelodeon Gak? Do you like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Nuclear Juice? Do you like Nuclear Fallout Splat? Do you like M30? Do you like Excelsior? Do you like Methadrone? Do you like that 5771? Do you like that Jolly Rancher Candy Apple Lean? Do you like that Candy Apple Fago? Enjoy Zip Wow. It's just a flavor pack of water. Do you guys like drinking water that looks like nuclear waste? Zip Wow. That's Sam's new drink, Zip Wow. Zip Wow. Okay, so then Elvis is mentioned a few times here. Their faces were marked with cryptic symbols. So the sort of pseudo-metaphysical language continues as the novel continues. So we start to see, again, zodiacal signs in dashboard lights, cryptic symbols in facial disfigurements, maps of highways in the bruised symbolism of the torso. I wrote central to psychopathy, mannequins in apartments, humans as dolls, lifeless. Because one element of this that's, again, everybody's seen the Dahmer show, right? Or at least read the things. We've all read Program to Kill. Is the ubiquitous mannequin in the house inner sanctum, dark sanctum of this serial killer. And of course, Vaughn has mannequins all over the place, but they're also they're crash mannequins. So it's taken to a more mobile and extreme symbolism here, mixed in a personalized way with his MO. The marriage of sex and technology reached its climax as the traffic dived at the airport overpass and we began to move forwards in the northbound lane. Often I watched him lingering over the photographs of crash fatalities, gazing at the burnt faces with a terrifying concern as he calculated the most elegant parameters of their injuries, the junctions of their wounded bodies with the fractured windshield and instrument assemblies. This is also like, I suppose it's sort of neo-Gnostic, right? Trying to be the sort of death angel of the highway, where he can create life through ultimate cataclysmic death, and a kind of chaos out of order, I suppose. The world was beginning to flower into wounds. Starts chapter 16. Fucking shit, dude. Airplane crash, postmodern sex death, height of post-industrialism, the Road Research Lab, sky and land melding into one in fire, Midsummer Nightmares. Okay, so page 69, I said, let's see, it says, the car ahead advanced a few yards. Its brake lights illuminated the interior of the Lincoln, covering us with a pink sheen. It's no mistake also that it's a Lincoln. This precedes McConaughey's Lincoln, but Lincoln because he's obsessed with the JFK event. So, of course, I suppose the Lincoln is the closest thing in terms of the name. But it invokes a kind of unconscious assassination, right? Through the driving mirror, I saw that Catherine was leaning against the rear seat. Her shoulder was pressed tightly into Vaughn's. Her eyes were fixed on Vaughn's chest at the scars around his injured chest, shining like points of light. He embodies the broken landscape in the crash itself. And then eventually everything, gymnastic ballet, celebrating a new technology, everything, even the verbs start to take on a pornographic sexual dimension. I inserted my coins in the pay slot, becomes a kind of self-parody. Yeah, his scarred hands explored the worn fabric of the seat, marking in cryptic diagrams some astrological sign or road intersection. Around the car, an immense pool of white bubbles subsided into the wet concrete. Vortex. It's a vortex. Chapter 18, I wrote Crowleyan aesthetic terror. It says, Catherine sat forward, freeing herself from Vaughn. She touched my shoulder in a gesture of domestic affection. In the driving mirror, I saw the wheels of her cheek and neck, the bruised mouth that deformed her nervous smile. These disfigurements marked the elements of her real beauty. That's Crowleyan. That's straight up Crowleyan. And it's also, there's a pun on the word wheels because it's it's like W-E-A-L-S, the common wheel. This is the wheels of the car. Vaughn's flat is on page 73. Let's hear about his flat. All of this in the film was transferred to Canada. I think Cronenberg said that, he filmed all the scenes like 15 minutes from his house. And the thing about Cronenberg, I've covered Brandon Cronenberg. Remember I did Possessor and Infinity Pool. Have I covered any other Cronenberg? I got a sponsored stream to do Cosmopolis and his first movie, Antivirus. But that's coming up. Cosmopolis, I'm waiting to do Cosmopolis because I read the book a million years ago.
or back in the 2000s or whenever it came out, but I can't find it. So I'm just trying to get the book again and then do that before I cover the movie. But the thing that so here's my take on David Cronenberg. You can have your own opinions. Of course, everyone does, and you disagree about what you like in film. But I've never liked David Cronenberg films. The only films that I like are his two most normie films. I like A History of Violence and Eastern Promises. And I say normie films because even though those deal with non-normie aspects, History of Violence is about, the mob and hiding your identity in the Western landscape and then going back east, which is a reversal of the typical American mode. And then Eastern Promises, which of course deals with, again, the mob, but deals with the Vori, right? Great movies. I really like those two movies. I love those two movies. I'm not a fan of his other movies. And I think it's because, part of it is because it's like the same reason that I don't like David Lynch's Dune, which is that I saw it very young and it scared me when I was young. I saw it when I was like 4. So it scared me and it grossed me out, and I can never get that out of my mind. And I don't like movies that are squishy and squanchy. I don't like the sounds of liquid burbling and bubos. I don't like that. I don't like body shock and body horror. Those things gross me out. And I understand that people watch those movies. I understand, I don't like Cronenberg's Naked Lunch because it's not that I think that he didn't get an accurate take on the movie. I just don't like it. It's repugnant to me. Now, that's part of the reason for the movie. It's supposed to be like that. I get it. But, Naked Lunch with the Exterminator, I see the novel completely differently than he depicts it in the movie. And that's fine. That's his take. But I don't like exploding heads. I don't like, I don't like what's his face in Videodrome. Dead Ringers is a good movie. I understand the movie, but I don't like splaunchy, squishy, bubotic, gurgling sounds. That shit just fucking just gross to me. Now, again, I get it. But it's not really what I see when I read Naked Lunch, for example, with all the cockroaches in the Exterminator. The cockroaches in the Exterminator just as a basic take, as a metaphor for addiction and a kind of psychic energy. It works in a sense because it's bugs, right? He becomes obsessed with bugs and the invasive biological aspects, right? Existenz to me is, I rewatched it like 2 years. Jethro and I talked about this. I rewatched it like about 2 years ago when it was on the Boomer Tube, and with Jude Law, and it's just like the like squishy gun, like I just don't like that shit, man. I don't like all of the I don't like all of the nuclear juice noises in Alien. Alien is supposed to, obviously, I get Alien. And but even the word, think about it, even the word face sucker has a kind of resonance to it that is, you should find repugnant in your conscience. It's supposed to be something that Giger is like, even Giger's name, right? It's like, that name shouldn't exist. It's an unsayable kind of name. It doesn't make sense. It should be slightly different than it is. But it also reminds me of like a Geiger counter and nuclear death and then the scorpion alien and covering the whole face, so your face is covered by this alien sucking your. I don't like it's onomatopoetic, right? The gross action is involved in the word itself. It's reflected in the word. So, anyway, getting back to this movie and Cronenberg, I think that it's weird because this is actually this movie kind of fits in with Eastern Promises and History of Violence in a way because, again, it's like the movie is linear. We get, like, recognizable physical landscapes. And one of the things about that is actually kind of insidious. It's actually brilliant that he does this in the movie and that Ballard does this, because Ballard oftentimes sets his books in a kind of urban landscape that functions as an island against the exterior noise, and it also focuses all of the kind of globalist shenanigans in one thing. High Rise does that. What's his other book about the like terminal island? It's not called that, but it's what's this one about the island, the urban island? And so it's saying that, like, kind of like how in Judge Dredd, where we have Cube City, where all of the people go, and the city, especially London, functions as a megalopolis. So it's a microcosm of the macrocosmic globalist vision of the world, and it's all sprawl and brutalism. And so the movie Crash kind of does that in a way, because it's mostly gray and dark, but we see everyday life going on around us, around the characters in the movie. They are a vehicle, pun intended, for us to be in the film, but it puts us into this uncomfortable situation we couldn't have imagined, and we don't want to be there. But one of the things about Cronenberg is that this is supposed to be something disgusting about the world, but nevertheless, you walk away going, no, there's a truth to this, and this is the world now. I don't want it to be, and I don't want to be part of that thing, but that's the way that people are, or society is becoming, where people are driving along on the highway, and there's all sorts of normal-looking cars, and it's the 90s, and James Spader looks normal. James Spader's a cool-looking guy. Right, the actor's cool. Holly Hunter is in the movie. Holly Hunter is like, I've never seen Holly Hunter in a movie like this before. Holly Hunter, my take about Holly Hunter is that she's the alpha Jodie Foster. Yeah, Jamie says 199. Shouts out to Jamie, and she says, I hate the skin controllers in Existence. Yes, it's nasty. It's grody. Body shock, body horror. It's like when people take a sample of river water, and then the scientists look at it under the microscope, and you see like eyes in it, and you see those transparent parasites. Oh, fucking, that's just so fucking gross to me, dude. Transparent bodies of snake worms on a microscopic level with eyes looking at you in a, under a microscope. It's just like, you remember that show? You remember that show, Monsters Inside Me? You guys ever see that? They were like, this young man went swimming in the James River in Richmond. Unknown to him, they had recently experienced spikes in ketone levels. He went home and he had an itch in his eye. His mother looked in his eyeball, and they pulled a 14-inch transparent worm from his pupil. It's just fucking so horrifying, dude. But I guess that's the metaphor for the insidious globalist, satanic, inverted, poison landscape of the future that they want, right? So Cronenberg, Holly Hunter is the alpha Jodie Foster. Holly Hunter, here's my take. Holly Hunter should have been in Silence of the Lambs. She just should have been. She's everything Jodie Foster is. People are going to get mad about this, I know, but that's okay. Jodie Foster, listen, Dr. Lecter, have you seen that movie where I'm in the forest with Liam Neeson? My name's Nell. Dr. Lecter, have you seen The Secrets of NIM? Did you know that The Secrets of NIM is the National Institute for Mental Health that Charlie worked for, where he got his acid and did his MK Ultra experiments in the book Chaos? Did you know that, Dr. Lecter? That's why they called it that, because the scientist who worked there, he did rat experiments with LSD, D-lysergic acid diethylamide, and he saw them, and he saw them as metaphors for extensions of humans, so he put them in a maze, and he made it a book. Did you know that, Dr. Lecter? So Holly Hunter should have been in Silence of the Lambs. Holly Hunter is more full-bodied in terms of her mental state watching the movie. Okay, I don't know what that means. That's just a bunch of gobbledygook that I just said. But what I mean is that I believe her in the movie. When I'm watching Silence of the Lambs, I'm watching Jodie Foster. And the terror kind of doesn't come as easily or as like authentically or something, I don't know, as it would with Holly Hunter. Holly Hunter's great in this movie because she plays so against type. This is a difficult character to play. She plays a damaged, physically and mentally damaged wife of a guy who's been killed in a car accident who has to have an affair with the killer. And they get into a psychosexual relationship in an omnivorous death spiral with a Crowleyan, Luciferian Elias Codius, who functions as a Marlon Brando-esque Burt Reynolds Gator / Smokey and the Bandit in the hellscape of 90s Canada, foreshadowing the future now. That's my take. James Spader's great. Did you know that James Spader, he has this thing I have where he, when he thinks of words on the page, or when he's reading a script, or when he has to act, he imagines the words on the page. He can see the words on the page, which is different from memorizing lines. That's a kind of eidetic, or he probably has a straight up eidetic memory instead of a hyperthymesia. But did you know that one tie-in that's weird with this in a meta world, since we're talking about that, is that James Spader was friends with John John, and John unfortunately perished in the plane crash, and his dad perished in the car in the event in 1963, and that they were friends, and that James Spader went to Andover, Phillips Andover. Did you know that? Phillips Academy. He's a boarding school kid. Guy now. But he's great in this movie, and Elias Codius is great. I mean, Elias Codius is one of these guys who has never, I mean, he doesn't win awards. He's a total character actor, but he's far superior as an actor than the movie stars. He's an actor. He's playing a role that we believe in the movie. He's fantastic. He plays who would take this role? Who the fuck would take this role? But, it's stunning and brave that he took it. I guess. I don't know. The book, to me, is much worse. I drove him to his apartment, a large single-room studio on the top floor of a block overlooking the river north of Shepperton. Linnea North. The room was filled with discarded electronic equipment, electric typewriters, a computer terminal, several oscilloscopes, tape recorders, and cine cameras. Bales of electric cable were heaped on the unmade bed. The shelves and walls were packed with scientific textbooks, incomplete runs of technical journals, science fiction paperbacks, and reprints of his own papers. Vaughn had furnished the apartment without any interest. The selection of chromium and vinyl chairs looked as if they had been seized at random from a suburban department store window. So the house, the dwelling unit, always functions as the exterior symbol of the inner state of the characters. And here, of course, we get total chaos. But there's a method to his madness, and the methodology only comes through the pictures that he's put together. So all the rest is chaos, and that functions, again, as a kind of metaphor, or an outer symbol, rather, for the way that he wants to perish in car accidents. He thrives on mangled machinery, and he wants it all chaotic, and yet he just tries to decipher in a metaphysical way each of the things and then embody them into himself, each of the elements of the crash. Vaughn was self-consciously absorbed in these fading images, straightening their curling corners as if frightened that when they finally vanished, his own identity would also cease to matter. That is the same as Bateman in American Psycho. I simply was not there. Total nihilistic obliteration. I saw the interior, page 74, I saw the interior of the motor car as a kaleidoscope of illuminated pieces of the bodies of women. For Vaughn, the motor car was the sexual act's greatest and only true locus. The clear equation he made between sex and the kinesthetics of the highway was in some way related to his obsessions with Elizabeth Taylor. Gabrielle, right, check this out. Let's see if we can get the inverted religious imagery here. Gabrielle, inverted, Gabrielle, swung herself among the hundreds of cars displayed on their stands, their chromium and cellulose bodies gleaming like the coronation armor of an angelic host. Postmodern tour de force is mentioned here. Yeah, and shouts out to Mixkey who sent me the song, what is it, Dark Leatherette, which is a song that was influenced by Crash, the book. And, of course, Leatherette is mentioned 3 times in this book. Once is here. Is it 2? I think it's actually it's twice. But when you go through, like, again, if you can't take anything from a book, if it's important that you take one word or phrase from a book, that's really all that matters in the end, is something that changes you and that you latch onto, because it's made of language, it's made of words, so you need the words to resonate with you. And for instance, this one of these was tour de force right here, because tour de force, I mean, it's forced, it's forceful. It's the crash itself, it's the automobile. And the tour is the circle, right? They're on this kind of cyclical motion in their lives. Also, Midsummer Nightmare, like, and oblique geometry. Just take one word from a book, and it means something. It's any of these books. But all of the language in this is so potent. He's an extremely potent writer. He's a great economy of language. Ballard does. Yeah, the world was beginning to flower into wounds. Again, which is kind of like the. Remember the. Hold on, that's like the flowering boutonniere of blood in Cormac McCarthy's All the Pretty Horses. Remember that when the guy gets shot right in the chest, the boutonniere of blood, or the fan of blood, the fan of blood spray. Blood Meridian McCarthy image. This is sick. So this is where it gets ultra satanic here. It says, I visualize my wife injured in a high impact collision, her mouth and face destroyed, and a new and exciting orifice opened in the Okay, I'm not going to read that. You know what? I'm not even going to, fuck that. I'm not even going to, you can read it yourself. It's chapter 19 in the book. I'm not going to read it here. I'm not prudish, but I'm not going to read that fucking part. Here he mentions, however, Vaughn had worked out the imaginary sexual acts within the automobile of a host of famous personalities, politicians, Nobel Prize winners, international athletes, astronauts, and criminals, just as he had already conceived their deaths. As we strolled through the airport parking lots searching for a car to borrow, Vaughn would cross-examine me about the ways in which Marilyn Monroe or Lee Harvey Oswald would probably have had intercourse in their cars. Armstrong, Warhol, Raquel Welch, their choice of vehicle and model year, their postures and favorite zones, the freeways and autostradas of Europe and North America along which they moved in Vaughn's mind. Their bodies funded by their limitless sexualities, love, tenderness, and eroticism. Yeah, Eros and Thanatos override the narrative of this book. It's fucking so wild, dude. Okay, double inversion here. This is page 81. At this moment, the injured woman was probably dying, her blood pressure falling, organs heavy with uncirculated fluid, 1,000 stagnant arterial deltas forming an ocean bar that blocked the rivers of her bloodstream. I visualized her lying on a metal bed in the emergency ward, her face bloodied and her shattered nasal bridge like the mask worn at an obscene Halloween, the initiation rite into one's own death. I visualized the graphs that recorded the falling temperatures of her organs, the steepening gradients of nerve function, the last curtains of her dying brain. Fucking shit, dude. It's a total Crowleyan. It's satanic. I'm not saying I'm saying what he is conveying here is. It's not the language itself, yes, is dark. But do you see how this is accurate? the curtains of her brain, right? The dual hemispheres, the monarch hemispheres, going into a Halloween death rite. See page 88. A confetti of fragmented glass covered in covered the front passenger seat. Remember, once I posted that what's his name? Kieran Carson. Kieran Carson was my teacher at one of my professors at Queen's University Belfast, Seamus Heaney Poetry Center. And Kieran Carson has that famous poem called Belfast Confetti, which is the throwing of bricks in the riots. But here we get the confetti of the glass, of the frosted glass. An armada of angelic creatures, each surrounded by an intense corona of light, was landing on the motorway on either side of us, sweeping down in opposite directions. They soared past, a few feet above the ground, landing everywhere on these endless runways that covered the landscape. I realized that all these roads and expressways had been built by us unknowingly for their reception. Around me, the interior of the car glowed like a magician's bower. The light within the compartment becoming darker and brighter as I moved my eyes. And then Luciferian images here. Here's the Luciferian Vaughn, page 87 of the book. Vaughn's skin seemed to be covered with scales of metallic gold as the points of sweat on his arms and neck fired my eyes. So he's a Luciferian serpent image. We have, again, in the final chapters, the empty city. The emptiness of the city they're driving around, they start to see no people. And that's crazy because ultimately they want the total destruction of the world through the car cataclysm, but they are unexcited when they see the lack of people on the roads. I wrote in this part, yeah, okay, this is page 92. By some paradox, this sex act between us had been devoid of all sexuality. I said absolute slaves to beast passions in a satanic act of consummation between death and degradation, a void. And finally, let's see. Yeah, that the book ends. I'll read the last part of the book here. The damn PDF. So he says, I hate getting PDFs, but my cigarette disappeared into the void there. Okay, don't worry, it wasn't lit. Meanwhile, the traffic moves in an unceasing flow along the flyover. The aircraft rises from the runways of the airport, carrying the remnants of Vaughn's fluids to the instrument panels and radiator grills of 1,000 crashing cars, the leg stances of 1,000,000 passengers. That's it. That's the book. That is Crash by J.G. Ballard. Okay, I found it. All right, so that's the book. What do you guys think? That's you see why I did this on Friday After Dark Skinemax stream or whatever, right? So that's J.G. Ballard's Crash. Let me know what you think. I know people know this book, and I know that cheery stuff. No, but it is there is a kind of you don't have to be totally demoralized by a book like this because if you're strong enough, right? You have to be able to read something like this and be invigorated by the sense that at least I know as a reader what the problem is, right? And to get a revelatory depiction of the way the world is, and especially seen through a 1973 lens, and something that is so accurate. Now, this is accurate in terms of truth. It's not all factual and real, but these events happen, and we see them. And I think this is a good way of discerning the meaning of these events. The car crash into the mass event, right? So that was J.G. Ballard's Crash. The movie is interesting because, like I already discussed, but I think that ultimately the movie starts to lose gas. Actually, it starts to lose steam because it becomes too twisted into the personal lives of the characters in a way. I can't explain how. It just loses momentum. And that's crazy because it's a short book and it's a short movie. And maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just because I'm watching it. If the characters don't want me to care about them, then I start to follow through on what they wish, which is I start to not care about them. And then I start to not care about the narrative itself. Why should I? Right? It's just totally depraved. So I start to think, okay, well, I get it. Digital Minefield right there. Our friend Maddie says, that vintage independent t-shirt with the old school logo goes hard. Yep, that's my old independent shirt. That's my old independent shirt, right? That's my old independent shirt, right? That's my old independent shirt, right? Okay. Right. That's my independent shirt. Those are fake. Throwing up the fake signs for independent skaters everywhere. Throwing up those fake independent signs for those skaters everywhere. No, it's a great. When I skated poorly many years ago, I had independent trucks and an alien workshop board. Then I had a mystery board, but that was I was terrible. That was years ago. And then I had a Matt Hoffman BMX, and I actually I tell you this. When I was in Belfast, we had BMXs. I was riding a BMX bike when the Big 9 happened. It was a week before university started. It starts later there. And I was riding around Stranmillis, and we were on our BMXs. We'd ride around. And these were fun days with my friends. And anyway, I went to a concert like a couple weeks later. I went to a concert, and right before that, going home, I like ran straight into. I like lost control. I was trying to do something. I was trying to do a trick on a park bench or something, and then I ran into a pole, and I gashed out part of my ear right here, and my ear was still bleeding when I went to the concert. It's so stupid. Well, whatever. That's youth. Not a very interesting story, but anyway. So, what do you guys think? What did you think of J.G. Ballard's Crash and also Crash Cinema? Oh, in the comments afterwards, why don't you guys leave what you think are your best Crash films? I mean, I think Death Proof is. My friend Andrew just sent a meme about Tropic Thunder, which is synchro because I just watched that. Like literally right before I got on the stream, I was watching Tropic Thunder again. That's crazy. Shouts out to Andrew out there. Yeah, what's your favorite Crash film? Not the 2005 film Crash, which came out when I was living in New York. Not that. Is it Crash the movie? Is it Death Proof with Stuntman Mike? Think of the prevalence of car crashes and symbolism in movies. It's crazy. There's so many movies about this. Killing Zoe is actually Roger Avery. It has elements of cars in it. You know, remember Pulp Fiction has this as well, but right? But Killing Zoe is a great movie as a kind of updated Clockwork Orange set in Paris. If you haven't seen that, it's got Eric Stoltz. That's a fantastic movie. I really like that one. What's another movie that involves this? What's the movie that Claire, what movie? Claire from Canada. We love Claire from Canada. What's that movie that she recommended about the riots in Paris, which has sort of elements of that? There are very few. I'm only bringing it up because is it Athena? Yeah, it's called Athena. If you guys haven't seen Athena, fantastic. I thought that was great. And it's by Costa Gavras' son, Romain Gavras, I think he did it. Yeah, that's a great movie because it's about riots in Paris. Another one is A Prophet, if you haven't seen that one, from the 2000s about Paris. Sometimes, you got to look outside of American cinema to find these kinds of movies, especially now. But I think that I noticed today that I think there is starting to be a turnaround with movies a little bit. And part of that is because it's the residual effect of the strikes and all that and the not making movies. And then the fact that the Marvel movies are going and that we're trying to look for new, we need new content and not just remakes. I haven't seen Dune 2 still. I'm going to see it this weekend, I hope. Yo, speaking of which, if you want to support me, do that please on the links provided because I could use that and I could go see Dune 2. I don't know how much it costs now to go to cinema. Last time I went was a discount for something, and I went to Napoleon, which was a bust, right? Remember that? But yeah, I think there might be a turnaround. I mean, we've got, who are the great filmmakers right now? Denis Villeneuve, right? I always enjoy Alex Garland stuff. He's got Civil War coming out. I don't like the who's the Greek director that does the movies with Colin Farrell. I don't like his movies. They always, I didn't like the Irish movie that came out last year with Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell. I don't like those. I don't like those movies at all. They made me angry. I've seen 2 of his movies, and both times I was really angry when I watched them. But I think there may be some decent movies on the way. Oscars are on Sunday night, and that'll be important to watch for the big ritual, right? We've got the Super Bowl and the Oscars. Of course, I know Jamie's going to do a great analysis, of course, that we're all going to watch about the Oscars ritual. But in the comments afterwards, yeah, KF that guy. Yeah, I don't like his movies at all. I really, really don't like his movies. They really, the one about the lobster really pissed me off. The deer one really pissed me off. I didn't like the one. It's not his movie, but I didn't like the Benedict Cumberbatch movie that came out that he got the Oscar nod for last year. I don't like movies like that. With needless death of innocents or creatures in them. That shit pisses me off. I might have missed some super chats. I'm going to get to the super chats here in a second. And again, if you want to support me, please, you can do that at any time. You can do PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. Those are in the video description and in the channel links. Please support me through those. PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, super chats. Those 4. Or any of those. Or you can like and share. You can share the stream. I get a lot of great comments and emails at madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com about, people found me through word of mouth. So that's great. Thank you so much, everybody who's done that. Really appreciate it. Shouts out to Jason out there who dropped $20 on PayPal. He says, for being the most basedest, littest, analyzest motherfucker on the web. Well, shouts out to you, Jason. You are the basedest. You are the basedest. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for dropping those links. Thanks for being a great mod. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for always being here. You are so awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate your support. Truly appreciate your support. Thanks, man. Shouts out to Ethan, who drops $10 for keeping the faith, carrying the fire. Thank you. Carry the fire. Life is fiery with its beauty, its incredible detail, and it is. It absolutely is. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Let me get to some. Also, shouts out to Daniel, who supported me last time with that $5. Thank you so much. Shouts out to my sister out there. Love you. Alejandra. Yo, it's New Metal March. But I was thinking it was going to be New Metal March, and I was just going to listen to Linkin Park for the whole month and Deftones. But then I started listening to, now it's kind of Shoegaze March, and I started listening to only The Pains of Being Pure at Heart. If you like shoegaze, if you like sort of, noise pop, listen to Dive, D-I-I-V, and listen to The Pains of Being Pains of Being Pure at Heart, their first album. Good albums. It's good. That one came out in like 2007 or 8. And Dive is still making music. They're coming to Richmond actually in July. I'm going to go see them. Dive is the band that dated Sky Ferreira back in the day. Let's see. So shouts out to those people. Thank you for those. Let's look at some super chats here. Show me my viewer activity. Excuse me. Fudge. Yeah, I like the synth. I like it when shoegaze mixes in with synth. So I like M83. I haven't liked M83 stuff for a little while now. But one of the best concerts that I ever saw was July 29th, 2012, M83 on their tour, when Midnight City came out. But that concert was so fantastic. I'd liked M83 for a while. And here, let me pull up some M83. I can't play it, of course, which fucking sucks. That's one of the bad things about this. We can't ever play music, of course. But we can play our Rooks G. M83 kind of changed because they started doing soundtracks. He started doing soundtracks. But I like, one of my friends knows the old synth and player, the singer, the girl she sings for him sometimes. She has this band called White Sea. Yeah, Before the Dawn Heals Us in 2005. That was a good album with the song Teen Angst. That's a good shoegaze song. And Saturdays Equals Youth is like, I think it was album of the year 2007 or 2008 for Pitchfork. But Saturdays Equals Youth is a great album. Like start to finish, to me, it's a perfect album. It's the one with Kim and Jesse, Skin of the Night, Graveyard Girl, We Own the Sky, Dark Moves of Love. So fucking fantastic, dude. It's so good. So good. Saturdays Equals Youth, M83. Fantastic album. What's her name that does White Sea before I get off of here? Let me see what her name is. I really like her. She was in M83. Morgan Kibbe. That's her name. I like her. Morgan Kibbe. Okay, so let me look up real quick here. Let's look up. It's not going to show me my viewer activity, so I'm going to look it up for you guys, because thank you so much for all of the members, the memberships, all of the shouts out. You guys are fantastic. I'll be back with some member streams and some movies and some more books soon. And let's see, supers. Yeah, shouts out to Digital Minefield out there again for that $4.99. Thank you, Jason. Oh, he says, can we get an Abyss for me and Crispy? Abyss, oh, let the water fall. Abyss, oh, let the water. She was an innocent bystander. She had good looks. She had good manners. Pretty little thing, little body. Oh, not a thing. Oh, on the after party. And another thing, and so let the water fall. Abyss. That's a song by The Dream. You guys know who that is? Shouts out to Jamie out there for that $1.99. She hates the skin controllers and Existence. Also, Jamie dropped that $4.99. Thank you so much. Let's see. Randy West dropped that $1. Oh, did we get one from Mav? Is this new? Let me see here. Oh, that's from last time. Yeah, for HBO Man. Luck. That was Michael Mann. Yo, shouts out to Mav out there, who was is a big supporter. Mav, I hope you're in here right now. And Kit, everybody's in here. Real John Connor. Okay, you guys, I guess that's about it. Let the water fall, Abyss. You just took like a bunch of shots. You took a bunch of shots of that Zip Wow, of that Nickelodeon Nuke Splat, of that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Nuclear Waste Juice, that 5771 Excelsior, that Norco Methadrone. You took a lot of shots of that. Methadone. You took a lot of shots of that. Excelsior. Splat. Juice. Now. Buy it. Green. Gack. Abyss flavored. All right. That's about all I got, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to support me, do that anytime. Look at the links. I'll be back very soon. Lots of movies coming up. If you want to see a movie, drop it in the comments afterwards. Let me know your favorite Crash movies. I'll be doing. Right now, I'm reading The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and Bronte. I'm also going to read this Castro and Che Guevara book. I'll be reading this Ezra Pound, The Image and the Real book soon. And then also the big one coming up next might be Bret Easton Ellis's The Shards. But we got a bunch of books to cover. If you want to see me cover a book, you can help inspire me with something to read by doing that. I got Franz Kafka's The Trial. I've got Spring Breakers, the movie to cover. I got a bunch of sponsorships coming up. If you want to sponsor a stream, you can drop $100 and I will do that. Thank you so much. Links in description and in the chat description and the video descriptions. If you dropped one and I didn't get to you, forgive me. I will get to you next time, please. And let's see what we got coming up. Oh, and please make sure you like the stream. Help me get these numbers up. Help me get these numbers up, you guys. Hope everybody has a wonderful March. Oh yeah, BLA wins the Prince Harry stream. Yeah, well, you just reminded me we got to do that one. I gotta do the Prince Harry autobiography because I know that I'm the only one who's gonna read it for you guys, and that's cool. But it has the red mist in it. Spring Breakers, yeah, that was a sponsored stream a while back. Got to do that one. Bunch of movies and books to read. Help me with my my book fund, my movie fund, going to the movies fund. I got to do Westworld. Leaves of Grass. Got to do Westworld. I watched part of season 1 again last night, so I'll be doing Westworld soon. There was a bunch of stuff that I forgot in that, so I'll be doing a full analysis of Westworld season 1 soon. And that's about it. Yep, help me get those numbers up. Go back to see my last streams. Cormac McCarthy, Kurt Vonnegut, the Shakespeare stream. Look at the literary streams, lit streams. Okay, guys, that's about all I got. See you guys later. Peace. Hope everybody has a wonderful March. St. Patty's Day is coming up. Spring break is coming up soon. Maybe I'll do Spring Breakers on spring break. And getting warm out there. Hope everybody's feeling good. And listen, was it worth it? Yep, if you're strong enough. Thanks, y'all. Let's get to Rooks G. Shouts out to Rooks G. Here we go.
one more here. Up Down by Rooks G. Thanks for the gifted memberships, everybody. Have a great night. Love you. Peace.